Seattle Sperm Bank is giving leftover sperm vials to the FBI. This was just published by LGBTQ Nation. And I am beyond grateful to that news media organization for doing this. I've been working on this story tirelessly since 2022 when I first learned about this terrifying admission. And seeing it actually in a headline, seeing it in an article was a huge relief. It's also extremely scary and nerve-wracking because I know that I just whacked a hornet's nest, but I stand by the fact that people absolutely had a right to know this because this story is utterly complicated. There are so many facets to it, and we are going to slowly go through things. I will say, though, for my own defense and my own, I would say safety, there's a few tricks up my sleeve that I'm not going to be sharing quite yet. But if there are people who do actively decide to take action or decide to come after me in any form, I'd like to save a couple of things just in case that ends up happening. So we're going to wait and see what ends up happening. Seattle Sperm Bank is giving leftover sperm to the FBI. LGBTQ Nation just published that yesterday on May 21st. And I am forever in LGBTQ Nation's debt. Please go give them a like, a listen, and certainly a subscribe. They are a news station that is all surrounding LGBTQ news. Please go support them, especially right now when we need to be centering LGBTQ voices. This is a story that I've been working on since 2022, and I cannot believe it's been printed. There were as many times where I thought this was never going to happen, and I'm still kind of taken aback that it is. Now, there are so many pieces to the story. There's so much of a ripple effect to this that going through this like layer by layer is going to take time. But we're going to start that. I am going to have a interview with Eve Wiley come on and sort of elaborate a little bit more on what happened in the meeting because she was actually present for that. And I'm so grateful that she was willing to come forward. And yeah, let's get to it because what's up? My name is Laura and I am your donor conceived person of the interwebs. Welcome to Insemination, the podcast that is all things donor conceived. So the link to the full article is in the caption of this episode, which I would really encourage everyone to go read. And again, please go support LGBTQ Nation. They really need it. And they deserve it. They're great. I'm always very impressed by their reporting and have always been impressed by their reporting. I do want to say I took this story to a streaming service actually, and in last year to try and get this out there as sort of a bigger project. And the streaming service particularly said about this story, and I'm never going to forget it, literally said, like, we get why this is big, we get why this is bad, but the problem is it doesn't really come full circle, meaning that we don't have victims of it yet. We don't have people who have, like, we know have gone to jail because of this, who have been wrongfully accused of a crime, who have been wrongfully indicted. Like, they're like, there hasn't been any, like, victim yet. And I just was sitting there and I'm like, okay, hold on, wait a minute. We have the ability to showcase a very real problem. We have the ability to showcase the world something like a huge injustice that is happening before there are victims. That's the whole point. You specifically are like, nah, we want to wait till there's actual victims. We want to wait till the problem has become a problem. I just was like hearing this going like, God, we're in the fucking bad place. Like, geez, like we have the ability to help people. My God. So the reporter who wrote this story, did another piece, about the problems within the, sperm donation industry, a little while ago, and she did a fabulous job on it. It was so well done. It was so well covered. She got so many different voices. She just did such a great job that, once Doge once Trump was inaugurated and once Doge started like going into all these government agencies and hacking all of this personal information, I just went on full red alert and full panic. I think it's obviously almost everybody did because I had this story and I knew what the FBI had. They had sperm vials. And that terrified the living bejesus of me that suddenly Doge could gain potentially access and information on that. And we know how the Trump administration has been targeting people of color, the trans community, the queer community, and it just literally a full-blown panic attack. I called Molly and LGBTQ Nation like in tears, and I went on a Zoom call with Molly, and I was like, I have to tell you this story, and I would really love for you all to think about publishing it. And I'm like, and I know it's big, and I know it's gonna be scary, but just like if you could consider it, I would appreciate it. And I went on this like venting rampage for like I think 30 minutes going through the story, and I'm like screaming, and I keep going like I'm screaming, and I'm like, I'm so sorry, Molly. And she's like, no, no, let it out. It's okay. Because I'm so angry about this story and everything tied to it and how everyone has kept silent. I am so full of rage that I have had about this for 3 years. And she was just so sweet about it. She was like, it's okay, don't worry about it. Let it out, let it out. And I'm like, okay. And I'm in tears. And I'm just like, I don't know what to do. Can you consider it? And then I think it was a couple of weeks later, she came back and she was like, we're going to do it. And I was just in tears that they were going to do it. And I was like, okay, whatever you need, I'll do whatever you need. Like, what do you need? And I just like going through every single one of my files, handing over everything that I need. I'm just so, so appreciative. So let's talk about what was going on in 2022. 2022 was a really big year for donor conception. A lot of things happened. So we had Our Father came out on Netflix. Our Father is about Dr. Klein, the fertility doctor who switched out the chosen donor sperm and dad's sperm in IVF. And we now know over 100 patients. The number continues to go up. That documentary rocked not just the nation, but the world. Everyone was freaked out about that. So that came out, and that Our Father changed everything. Like even from my little corner of the internet, I could see a huge difference in my comment section when Our Father came out. When Our Father came out, I remember I got comments from people going, holy shit, you haven't been lying this whole time. And I'm like, no, asshole, I haven't. Motherfucker. No. So Our Father changed everything. What also came out in 2022, by the way, for anyone who's new here, we fully film this podcast as well. We don't just record it. And there are going to be a lot of visuals to this episode. So I do recommend potentially taking a look at what we post on YouTube because I will be showing things. For example, also in 22, Wall Street Journal printed this article out that basically really very bluntly said that only 2% of active donors are Black in 2022. And this article also made a lot of waves. It was huge when it came out. Now, I'm very grateful that the information that only 2% of active donors are Black came out. I am. What I didn't like about the article was I really felt like it didn't hold the fertility industry accountable. To me, the vibe really was like, wow, like, yeah, there's just this weird disparity. For some reason, the Black community just doesn't want to be donors. Wow, that's so weird. Wow. And there just was no accountability for the sheer racism that the industry has been exhibiting for decades. We've had white supremacists hold position of power in the fertility industry. The fertility industry donor conception was founded on eugenics. If you talk to recipient parents of color, they will all actively tell you how hard it was to find a donor that matched their family's ethnicity. Donors of color have been coming out and saying consistently that they have no idea why they were turned away as a donor when they hit like every single check mark in the book, but consistently it's the donors of color that are turned away. And according to Dr. Diane Tober's research, also Black and Hispanic donors are on average egg donors paid less than white and Asian egg donors. So like we can see the racism. We can see it. It's right there. And the fact that like the industry, like this article like didn't really like hit it for me, didn't hit that hard enough in my opinion, really kind of irked me. And what also irked me along with it was the article really felt like a calling card, specifically to get more Black donors to donate. I even remember when this article came out, I saw a lot of content from like Black content creators showcasing this article, being like, okay, I guess it's time for me to go be a donor. Like, it to me was very clearly like this was a call for more Black donors. Um, and I want to be very clear, we need a better diversity of donors in the donor catalog. Like, that is absolutely needed. But the fact that the industry has not taken accountable for its racist actions for decades is not good. We can't just move forward and not take accountability for what they have been doing and still kind of do to this day. Like, if you want to fix the problem, you have to first take accountability. That's kind of 101. And then lastly, we got major legislation, major donor conceived legislation passed in Colorado in 2022. The United States Donor Conceived Council was behind monumental donor conception legislation that made Colorado the very first open ID at 18 state, meaning that all donors had to be open disclosure when the donor conceived person hits the age of 18. Also, they made Colorado the very first state that had a 25 family limit, meaning every donor can only donate to 25 families so that each of those families can grow how they want. Like, they can have 1 kid, 2 kid, 3 kids, but only 25 families. Now, I know many people are listening going like, that's a lot. 25 families seems to be, that's still way too much. And I agree with you, it is, but it is a starting point, and we do need to celebrate our starting points because in the United States, we don't have any other regulated family limits. So the fact that we got one in Colorado was monumental. And there were many things else that came along with this legislation, like permanent record keeping, educational materials, stuff like that. Like, it was phenomenal that this thing passed. So that happened. And it was absolutely incredible. And the industry was not happy about it. The industry was so fucking pissed that this happened. No one expected this to happen because the industry is this multi-billion-dollar behemoth against these donor-conceived people who work on a shoestring budget. So the fact that, I mean, it really was just, it really was just this like incredible feat that we got this passed. I actually do have a tweet saved. At the time, it was a tweet. Now it'd be, I don't know, what is it called on X now? What do you call that? Obviously, it's not a tweet. Are you Xing? What is it? I actually do have a saved tweet from ASRM, the American Society of Reproductive Medicine. If you do not know, ASRM is the group that basically creates the guidelines, not regulations, for the clinics and cryobanks to follow. But ASRM tweeted out, this is the exact quote that ASRM did. ASRM supports protecting the rights of donors and patients in Colorado and thus opposes SB 224. I retweeted it and said, everyone screenshot this tweet so that when we eventually win, we never forget who thought our lives matter less than profit. It's so interesting because in this tweet, they never mentioned donor conceived people and I do think that was one of the most honest tweets that they've ever made because they don't care about us. They don't. They made it very clear in this tweet that they don't. The fact that we were not part of that tweet, that we were not part of caring, protecting, not worth it to them. But like, this is how against the legislation they were. So the fact that we got it passed was huge. And a little while later, there was this big invite to this stakeholder meeting. And a stakeholder, for anyone who doesn't know, a stakeholder is somebody who has a vested interest in a topic. And as we transition into actually talking about what happened in the stakeholder meeting, we are now going to welcome on fertility fraud activist Eve Wiley. Welcome back to the podcast, Eve Wiley. So excited to see you. Your hair looks also fantastic. I love the blowout.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, so I was just explaining to the listeners and the viewers, essentially, so where I am in the story is you all got invited to this stakeholder meeting. Can you explain sort of how this was presented to everybody about what this stakeholder meeting was going to be?
So I think my
To the best of your
perspective of
recollection.
this, yeah, as I know, right? It's
To
been a
the
few
best
years.
of your recollection.
To the best of my recollection, um, my understanding was, all the stuff in Colorado got passed, and then there was the fertility fraud stuff. And so, to my understanding, it was like, hey, let's have this big meeting and where all the stakeholders are together, and then let's just have a discussion, and just kind of, put names to faces and open dialogue between
Hmm.
all groups. That was my understanding. So, obviously, being a part of the legislation, I got invited to it and then showed up in LA.
And so the meeting took place, according to the article, on the California Cryobank campus in Los Angeles in October. And this took place right before the ASRM convention. This was not part of the ASRM convention. I really want to make sure that's highlighted so ASRM does not, get upset or anything. This was not part of it. It was right before the convention, but there were ASRM members at this meeting.
Yes, to my understanding, it was their advocacy group from DC, the ones that were like working there. And they had just put together a task force of, I believe it was donor conceived
Mhm.
advocacy task force or
Yes.
something. I volunteered
God,
and
I
was not
remember
selected.
that.
So, yeah,
I
and I think they like
remember.
literally just announced it. And we're like, wait a
Yes.
second, who are the people that got asked? Because I don't see any representation. But
I
literally it just happened.
Yeah. No, I remember that. God, I fucking remember that. Oh my God, there's so much shit that happened. So then you arrived and what kind like when you walked in this room, what did it look like? How many people did you see?
They walked in, it just felt like a very like classroom type setting, as far as I couldn't even count as how many people were there because it was the room was very packed. But I don't know. I typically haven't had like the best relationships with these people, so it wasn't like a huge like, oh my gosh, Eve Wiley, I've emailed you. Nice to meet you. I did not experience a warm reception, but that's totally fair.
Well, tell me if this is I've had other sources say that there was about like 70 people in that room. Does that sound about right to you, or would you say a little less, a little bit more?
I'd probably say a little more actually.
A little
But
bit
I
more.
do think that because it was over the course of a few days, I do think that, some people were there for the first day, some people
Mm-hmm.
only the second, or they were only there for a few
Yep.
hours because of the way the agenda was set. I wasn't presenting over anything,
Mm.
so but I would say between like 70 and 80, maybe even 90. That feels about
Okay.
right.
And then there was
It was packed.
it was packed, and then there was over Zoom. So we had all these people over
Yes.
Zoom, and I do want to highlight something in particular. People who had the Zoom link, what has been disclosed to me by multiple people is that Zoom link was spread around like hotcakes. There were more people having access to that Zoom link than were invited. So I don't think the organizers even it was not secure, and they had no idea how many people were viewing this over Zoom. That has been communicated to me by multiple people.
Wow. Now, this is not password protected,
This is not
where
like,
nobody was double checking the Zoom
well,
squares.
and speaking of that, everyone was just like, the rules of of the stakeholder. Sorry, I didn't mean to say ASRM. I apologize. The rules of the stakeholder meeting. People kept talking about like, we have to keep quiet. We have to stay hush hush about it. You said when you walked in, they were like, hey, will you sign this like sort of agreement that you're going to keep everything quiet? What did you do when you saw that?
I'm not signing that.
And you walked in, and you were like,
And
done.
then I walked in, and that was it.
So again,
And I do believe that I walked in a little late too, so there wasn't there
yeah.
wasn't, if you choose not to sign this, you can't participate. It was, I do not see a legal reason to sign that. I will not be signing that. And
So
that was
let's
it. They totally were like, okay, that's fine.
So the security on this was not great. So just notes to the fertility industry, you didn't exactly, this wasn't Fort Knox, all right? Um,
No. Which is
so
why it's shocking that, with everything that came out of the meeting, I don't know why you're not surprised when there was access to a lot of things.
I know. So then the meeting started, and as the article posted, this meeting sort of had the essence that originally it was sort of going to be an olive branch between the fertility industry and the donor conceived community. Once the meeting started, how did that olive branch feel?
So it didn't feel like an olive branch. It felt more like I don't understand what they mean by their what they meant by an olive branch, but I think we have very different understandings of what an olive branch is. It really felt more of like a lecture. Like I felt like, am I a child in trouble? Of
Mhm.
like, hey, this is how our industry operates. And I don't know, it felt really kind of like dumbed down and more kind of technical, depending on what the topic of conversation was.
Yeah.
And then I remember one woman who was up, and I think she was a genetic counselor, and they were very strict about her time. And like, you need to sit down, you need to sit down. And she was trying to quickly get through her presentation, but the generosity of time was extended to other presentations, just not necessarily to hers. But I would say it was for the most part lively discussions, and people were asking a lot of questions. Everybody in the audience felt very engaged, but
I mean,
it did not feel like an olive branch.
so I was not there at the meeting, but I was there the day afterwards. I was actively told that many of members of our community, the donor conceived community, left the meeting in tears, had to take breaks from it. I saw people afterwards, and blood literally was drained from their face. People still talk about that meeting in our community, and they say, "Yeah, I was traumatized from it due to the words that have been said to me was we were berated, we were bullied." Do you feel like that
I
is, how do you feel
I can
about that?
remember one. Yeah, no,
Okay.
I can remember one very specific amount of time. I forget what the topic was, but it had to do with like, being donor conceived. And basically, they were saying, they meaning the stakeholder, to the donor conceived person, made them feel minimized and marginalized.
Mm.
And, that they should just be grateful to be alive. And there were at least two people that were standing up crying while they were talking and sharing their experience. And I remember thinking, oh my God, I am actively witnessing a marginalized community marginalizing another community. I was like, I do not see how this is going to be effective at all. And then it
But
was shortly after that is when they were like, well, what are the next steps? And there was no plan for next steps. It almost felt like, hey, let's all get here together and let's have everybody talk and figure out what their future plans are so that way we can run, our offense and defense to try and like, maybe stop some of this. It felt like a formality that was it wasn't sincere.
isn't that the tactic of of like overlords, is make the marginalized communities fight with each other, make them feel like they're on the opposite ends, when in truth and reality we actually all are on the same side. It's just the big, I mean, that's been the tactic from the beginning of time. So then let's get up to the big moment, the 11 o'clock number. Um, Now, how this was explained to me, and please tell me if I'm wrong, but at this time, people were talking about family limits, and people were talking about how many babies can be made from one donor. And the banks were saying, we don't need a regulation. We keep to our own internal limits. And somebody from, I believe, I was always told it was from our community, but maybe I'm wrong. Somebody spoke up and said, that doesn't, okay, then please explain, then why do you have donors come in and donate for literally years on end? Because if you have donors donating for years on end, multiple times a week, um, then you have way more product than you could ever sell. So then what do you do with all that leftover product?
Yes.
Would you like to take it from here as to what transpired?
Well, I think the assumption was the leftover product is then exported to other countries, and then the number starts to zero for the offspring. But what was said was, oh, we sell it to the FBI. And that was that nail on the chalkboard, the kind of like gasp, the like, I'm sorry, what the fuck
So
did I
bad.
just hear?
It's
I
so
was like, wait, what?
I mean, that's a badly written script. That's a
It was know your audience. Literally know your audience.
Know
What
your
are you doing?
audience. We know that Seattle Sperm Bank is the one who said it, and you said it was like a nails on the chalkboard moment. How did the room react to when that dropped?
Like audible gasps. People were, and then kind of like the da-da-da talking amongst each other, and then people started asking questions. And so there wasn't like, I think that there was obviously motivation to quickly stop talking about it. Then it was kind of like, time, we've got to like move on to the next presentation, blah, blah,
No,
blah,
you
blah.
don't move on from that. You don't move on from that. You need to talk about
Yeah.
that.
But there were people that asked, like for clarification type thing. I personally didn't ask. I think I was really in shock because my mind, at that point, that felt very much kind of more in my wheelhouse because I'm like, whoa, do we have informed consent here? Is this just kind of like embedded in just like a blanketed
Yeah.
consent? How does this dictate? Because with fertility fraud, how does that dictate the donor's autonomy
Yeah.
too? How would a recipient parent feel knowing that like what are we using it for?
As you said, questions were asked. What was it being used for?
Bladder patterns.
Something that actually just was brought up to my attention that I didn't even think about was that doesn't make sense on so many levels because if we're giving the FBI leftover sperm vials, that means they're giving them leftover frozen sperm vials that have been washed. How can you do splatter patterns with fucking washed sperm?
I don't know. Doesn't make any sense.
That
I
doesn't
didn't
make
even
any
think about that
sense.
either.
That I no, someone just pointed that out in my comment section. I was like, oh fuck, I didn't even think of that. So for anyone who doesn't know, washed sperm is basically they separate the seminal fluid from the sperm so that you just get the condensed little sperm. So it's like washed sperm vials. It's a little baby nugget of fucking sperm. Like you can't do a splash pattern with it. I didn't even think about that. I was just like, God damn. And then also what was asked was, do the donors consent to this? Um, Now, I immediately upon hearing this was like, there's no way anyone would consent to this. That doesn't make sense. But one of the things that's very much frustrated me, Eve, is people who were at the meeting have been sort of saying, oh, but they consent to it, so it's fine. Like, I feel like that's given people permission to like not think and not care about it.
Hmm.
Has that
But like
been,
acknowledged informed consent, where it's like,
yeah,
hey, read through all of this fine print, and it actually
yeah,
says that we could potentially sell this to the FBI, or does it say that you release all of your, whatever you consent to us doing
yeah,
whatever we want with your leftover vials? Is it
yes.
explicit consent or is it just embedded in a blanketed consent?
And
Because it's probably just blanketed.
and I want to be and I do want to make sure that this is very fair that like everyone from this meeting kept a tight lip, including our own community, which really fucking pissed me off. I was told the next day about this, and immediately I was like, okay, well, we're researching this because this is the craziest, most terrifying thing I've ever heard. Um, and I don't want to name names for legal reasons, but would you mind sharing what one of the advocates did after this fucking meeting?
Well, I had one of them call me to
Mhm.
make sure that I was not going to come forward with this information
Hmm.
specifically.
And they called everyone. This specific called
That one called everyone. Oh man,
everyone.
I thought I was special. Just kidding.
No,
No,
this person
I
was doing laps. They called fucking everyone. And basically
in the
were
name of
uh-huh.
saying that they wanted to keep relationships, and this is our first time that we're actually invited
Hmm.
to these conversations. And, we need to respect the boundaries of the meeting and the
Yep.
confidentiality of the meeting. To which I said, great, I didn't sign those papers.
My
Also,
yeah.
I'm not an organization. I'm an individual. I don't take money from these people to where I feel like I need to keep my mouth shut. Like I will always speak the truth. These organizations and these agencies that say that they are protecting the interests of their communities, I don't see how you can do that when it's compartmentalized like that. When you're not leading and having hard conversations and bringing light to the darkness, because this is a serious allegation.
Yeah.
What they said is very serious and
Yeah.
dictates a lot, like because we don't know what
Hmm.
is actually happening with it and the potential
Yeah.
for it. It's very problematic, and it's even more problematic that every single person in that room chose not to do anything.
I mean, it is every single person in that meeting has stayed. I mean, I to be fair, some people have talked to me in the back and they're like, I don't know what to do, but here's some information. Go forth and be fruitful. And I
Totally.
so I do want to say there have been some people who have operated very silently. I will say to the fertility industry, I think it would shock and surprise you how many members of your industry came and talked to me to see if I could do something. So I will say there are a lot of members. Yeah, I think there are a lot of people who would be quite surprised how many people
They
actually
just don't
did
want
come.
the scarlet letter of coming forward. I don't blame them for
Yeah,
that. I don't blame them for that at all.
but I this industry, and this is the frustrating thing for me, is I compare them to Target. They put on a really good show of inclusivity, but when the going gets tough, they back down immediately.
When I took this as this is just another example of how the industry cannot self-regulate
No.
themselves.
Well,
Again,
yeah.
and in addition to malpractice and swaps and lack of protocols and all the other things, it is just another reason that they still do not lead with transparency.
Hmm.
And when is enough enough? Like, are we waiting for the
Yeah.
next type of come whatever comes out of this 20 something years from now? And it's like, oh no, we knew
Yeah.
there was just nothing we could do.
Yeah.
And it's frustrating.
Well, and I think what's
Do the right thing.
frustrating, and I think what's frustrating for both you and me, because I think you and I get hit with this a lot, is the fertility industry. And I mean, and I say this being all encompassing, meaning the whole fertility industry says that, we can't do donor conceived regulations because we can't we have to make sure that this is accessible, it's fair. We don't want to we need to think about inclusivity. We need to we can't do anything that could potentially hurt um, reproductive care or anything. And then, so to me, they put on a very good show of virtue signaling. And then we find this out. We
Mhm.
find this out, which is a direct threat,
Yep.
direct threat. And everyone stayed silent. No one said shit. We have no idea if other banks are doing this, if Seattle is
Mhm.
singular or if more of them did.
Yeah.
That
It's
is what
infuriating.
I mean, since 2022, I've been sitting here fuming like a little, piece of dynamite going, how dare you lecture me that fertility fraud legislation, like what you're working on, oh no, that could hurt accessibility. But you all know this fucking shit is going on and you said nothing?
Yep. And this
Fuck
is
you.
why it is makes me so, so, so mad because then what is it really about?
Yeah. Then what
Because
actually is it? Then what does it come down to?
and why is it the fertility fraud is this mythical dragon display? It's limit access. It has nothing to do with limiting access. It just prevents a doctor from impregnating his patients.
It prevents
Like
sexual assault. I
sexual, like what the hell? But we're cool with the FBI. That's fine. The same government we don't want involved, we're actually just gonna like hand it over to them.
I
Make it make
always
sense.
what always got me about your legislation is I understand there's donor conceived legislation that is gray, that's nuanced. I understand why banning anonymity might need a few conversations. I understand that. That's never something that I've been like, I get why we need to have conversations. I get why that might make people uncomfortable in the beginning. I understand why that is going to require some work. That's never shocked me. I have never to me, your legislation is black and white. Why is this a problem? This shouldn't, how is, obviously, I've never understood the problem. And the fact that your legislation is getting um just put on the back burner, that it is getting stopped. I'm like, that does not make sense. It does not make sense.
Because it's not about protecting
No.
artificial reproductive
Mm-mm.
technology. It's not about protecting
Absolutely
their
not.
groups,
Mm-mm.
which begs the question, what is it about then? It is about this like mythical dragon to slay, for whatever reason. It's the fact that fertility fraud legislation gets a lot of play in the media.
Yes.
And that's what it's about. It's about attention. It is like a child throwing a fit of they're getting too much attention. That's not fair, so we're not going to support it. Otherwise, what's the real reason? It's not there because you're telling me that you're cool with doctors sexually assaulting their patients and then them having kids. Once again, make it make sense.
It it
That makes sense.
it doesn't. And I can't believe that it took, I mean, you know how long I've been working on this. It was like pulling nails to get this fucking thing done, to get everything to come forward. And I'm like, I'm sorry, but this is to me black and white like fertility fraud legislation. This is wrong. This is wrong. I'm
People
sorry.
are worried. People are worried about the retaliation of it.
Mm.
No one wants
Retaliation from who?
from coming forward, from stakeholders, from their
Mm.
own communities, from the narrative that is spun that like you're anti-family building. because this is going to limit access. Because if this gets more media play, people are going to be mistrustful of the industry. Hold the fuck up. And this one never makes sense to me. It's like, wait. You did this. You did this. It's
You,
like, don't shoot the messenger.
well,
Like,
it
this is your own doing is creating the mistrust because of what you did and didn't do.
to me, it's almost the same thing of like you can't come forward about the guy who raped you because that's going to have negative implications on his life. That's what
Yeah,
it is. It's like it's like guys, you can't come forward about the car about your car crash because your airbags didn't go off right because they weren't regulated. That's going to make the auto industry really suffer. That's going to make people mistrust their cars.
you just need to take one for the team.
And it's just like, guys, I care so much about fucking fertility care and reproductive care. It deserves better than this. It deserves actual regulations to protect the sanctity of fertility care and reproductive care and all of the families and children and donors who go to this industry. We deserve better. I know this might sound like a mythical thing, but we can have fertility care where they don't send extra vials of sperm to the FBI. We can have that. I think we deserve that.
I think that'd be
Weird.
great. I think that'd be great.
I don't know why that's not hard.
Because they want to be able to operate the way that they always have, so they can get away with whatever they need to meet the bottom line. We just follow the money. And I think the another frustrating part of this too is
Oh,
every
the
time
multi-billion
the
dollar industry? Yeah.
yeah, exactly. All of these like huge VC companies are buying up these clinics and these businesses. And I think it's only going to get worse
Yeah.
until the government steps in. And the individuality of the care is honestly being taken out of a lot of it, which is unfortunate because it
Yeah.
becomes only about the bottom line. And I think that that's really frustrating to see as well. I think it's time. I think that Oh, I know what I was gonna say is that every time there is a sensationalized story in the media, it does create a level of mistrust and it pushes people to unsafe measures to expand their families. And so there's nothing wrong with using a known donor on the internet. However, it does make you more susceptible and vulnerable to bad actors. And so people tend to have this over reliance of, well, if I meet the person, then I'll actually know and I can make an informed decision, and that's not always the case. And so I do think that that is an unintentional consequence of having the way that the current industry operates, is it is pushing people to unsafe measures, and that is
Yes.
something that is very much in the scope of their control. But when they have a response to something like this with no accountability,
Yeah.
with no acknowledgement, it only makes it worse. I don't know what PR team was hired to respond to something like this, but but this ain't it.
It's that's the thing. Like I hear the fertility and whenever I talk to a member of the fertility industry, they always put on this like show of like, oh my gosh, the serial donors, oh my gosh, the Facebook donors. That's so scary. It's so terrible. I can't believe people use them. It's so terrifying. Blah blah blah. And they make it, and I'm like, okay, yeah, I agree with you. I am very anti-serial donor, 100%. It's your fault though. You are the one who made this happen, and you are the reason that people go to it. Like that's because of you, boo, because you haven't fixed your freaking industry. That's people
It is.
this didn't happen out of nowhere. It's because your industry costs a shitload of money and there's no safety nets.
Mhm.
What do
Or
you
accountability.
or accountability? So yeah, people are going so I disagree and I want to fully say this. I disagree. But I understand why people are like, why am I going to spend thousands upon thousands upon thousands upon thousands of dollars on an industry where there is where there's no safeguards, and I'll just get it for free on Facebook or for $50 where it's
Mhm.
comparable, which I'm like, I disagree. I think there's still safety within the industry, but I understand that line of thinking.
I do too. I absolutely do. And I think that it's also important to note that most doctors are really wonderful people and they are really
Yeah.
good at their jobs.
Oh yeah.
And a lot of it is outside of scope. Now they can demand, well, I will only work with you if you do have limits, or what are some of those safety precautions so I
Yes.
can make sure that it's passed on to my recipient parents. I do think that that is within their power.
Yeah.
And, I think it's perfectly within the realm of their control to start challenging some of that.
Yeah.
But the industry is so big, no one wants to be the person because it directly impacts their practice. So
I'm,
I kind of
I'm,
get it. It's frustrating, but I get it.
I mean, the amount of doctors I've talked to who are like, the minute I rock the boat, I'm kicked out of the kids club. I mean, you hear of the reactions from the doctors who are like, I expressed problems, and and the reaction is quite severe. And they are,
I
I
get the
understand
retaliation.
the retaliation is quite intense, but it also is like, okay, then more of you need to come together and do this because this is your industry. This is your line of work. You must stand up for it. I know so many of you are such good people in the industry. I know that I've spoken to you. You need to do something now.
Hmm.
You need to
If
get
there's
up.
not forced measurability or accountability
Yeah.
or anything like that, it's not going to happen.
No.
It's just simply not going to happen until it starts to affect the bottom line, unfortunately. Laura, thank you so much for having me on.
Thank you for being here. For
Always a pleasure.
everybody, continue. We are going to continue on the story. We are going to continue talking about this. I have more things to show you, more pieces of evidence. But thank you, Eve, for kind of bringing us into the nightmare scenario of the stakeholder meeting. Thank you so much, and have a lovely day.
You too. Bye.
Bye.
Do you need help finding your biological parents? Whether you're donor conceived, adopted, or an NPE, please contact DNA Angels. DNA Angels is a nonprofit team of genetic genealogists that help you identify your biological parents. And this group is run by donor conceived people, adoptees, and NPEs, so they will emotionally have your back during this process. DNA Angels has identified almost 5,000 biological parents since 2019 using test results from Ancestry DNA. And they are a nonprofit because they believe that your financial situation should not stop you from identifying your family. If you are searching to identify and possibly connect with your biological donor or missing parent, please reach out to dnangels.org. Must be at least 14 to apply, have tested at Ancestry, and presumed parents born in the United States of America.
Thank you all for listening to Insemination. If you haven't, please obviously go give Eve Wiley a follow on Instagram. But also, if you are not following me on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, and Threads, Facebook, please do. I'm Laura High Five everywhere. You also can go to my website, www.laurahighfive.com, for my full stand-up schedule. I'm very excited that August 28th, I will be headlining in Buffalo. As somebody who went to college in Rochester, I am extremely excited to be back in the area headlining. Tickets are available on my website. But if you haven't, please give Insemination a rating, a comment, do all the things, press all the buttons. If you're not following us, please do. Please submit. It really, really helps a lot. And again, just a reminder, we have the full thing up on YouTube. And if you're watching YouTube right now, you've noticed there's a little bit of a costume change. I had to pause recording this episode for a little bit, but now I'm picking up where I left off. So let's kind of continue on with the story. So there was the meeting. And we had the meeting. It happened. And then a bunch of donor conceived people kind of got together for lunch. We were all kind of there for different kind of donor conception activities. And we all met at a lunch, and it was tense. It was wonderful to see everyone. It was wonderful to meet everybody. It was so great, but you could definitely feel there was something off. Something was very wrong. And I know for me, and this is me, and this is my own fault. This is my own responsibility. I know when there's tense in the air, I get intense, and I'm like, what's going on? I just know something's wrong, and I can't figure it out. And we were kind of, told that the stakeholder meeting was extremely hard. We were told that some of our fellow donor conceived people who were at the meeting were leaving in tears. We were told that multiple people had to take breaks from the stakeholder meeting and regain themselves. We were told that to not this was genuinely the words that were used was it was a traumatizing meeting. And whenever I talk to people who were at the meeting still to this day, that word is still used. And it was very clear seeing the people who were there, there was just this 1,000-mile long stare, if I'm saying that statement correctly. So we start sitting, we're having lunch. It was expensive. It was insanely expensive. Oh my God. I remember it was $25-$30 for like this itty bitty little sandwich. But we're listening to everything that's going on, and we're hearing about all the things that like cryobanks and clinics were doing. We were hearing the awful things that were said to donor conceived people. And then I remember somebody said and there was that FBI thing. And I was like, what the FBI thing? What do you mean FBI thing? And somebody said, and then somebody basically told the exact same story that Eve Wiley did. We don't have to repeat it. And I was gobsmacked. It genuinely shook me to my very core. Now everyone reacts to these things very differently though. And I will say it was a little, I would say, frustrating for me because I felt like everybody else who was kind of at that table was kind of like, oh, that's interesting. Let's talk about YouTube again. And I was like, we can't talk about anything else. This is all we're talking about now. We have to do something like right now. I was in full shock and panic mode. I genuinely was, it was like I knew what the fertility industry had the capability of doing was pretty bad, but this was just never something I imagined. And there was somebody else there who also, again, was at the meeting, and I turned to that person. And this was a person, I'm going to be a little we're going to skirt around edges a little bit. This was somebody who I used to consider a friend, but has not been a friend for a long time. And I turned to this person and I was like, oh my God, I just heard about the FBI thing. Holy shit. How can we get people to come forward? At that point, I had a really great reporter connection. And I was like, we can do this. Like, let's go forward. Like this, the people have to know about this. This to me was just, this is something that all recipient parents, donors, donor conceived people, they have the right to know. Especially with the fact that how everybody freaks out over the online DNA test, like how everybody understandably has reacted to the whole 23andMe debacle. It's like, clearly this is something that people need to know. So I brought this up to this person and was just like, oh my God, I just heard. And I could tell that was the moment mine and this person's friendship ended. I could tell this person was just was not thrilled that I found this out and very clearly was like, nobody can come forward. We signed an NDA. No one can come forward. And I was like, oh shit, people signed an NDA. God damn, holy crap, that sucks. Okay, well, maybe we can figure something else out. And it just felt like everyone was trying to sweep it under the rug. It felt like a lot of people were, and it was so strange. And I couldn't understand how we were talking about anything else. To me, it felt like Bigfoot walked in the room, trashed the place, left, and everyone went back to knitting. And it's like, guys, Bigfoot just walked in. We have to talk about it. I felt gaslit, to be honest. So I went out, I called my reporter friend, and I asked her, I was like, am I crazy? Is this a big deal? What is this? And she was like, no, that's insane. She was like, that is clearly a problem. That is horrific to hear. That's terrifying. Absolutely. She was like, that's insane. And she told me what you're going to need to find, though. She was like, you need to find donors who were donating kind of in the right time frame. Certainly more recently. Ask them if they were ever told that this was something that they could have consented to. Was this ever something that was brought up to them as an option? Have they ever heard of this? And we also need to see a contract to also confirm our suspicions that there's nothing in the language that is directly stating this. So I was like, okay, I have my orders. We now move forward. And things are just weird now. I have to say, the energy is just it's very strange. I am not okay. And I think anyone who remembers that trip will 100% go Laura was not okay. The person who I said, I think our friendship ended in that moment, it was very clear, pretty quickly, the tables turned very fast on us. We were not looking at each other in the same way. There was something very off. And I know for me, I felt very kind of betrayed because I was just come on, this is clearly bad. Why Why aren't you doing, like, why aren't we trying to figure something out? And I felt like they were treating me very much like a threat. I felt very just like they were looking at me as like a bomb that was about to go off. And there were a bunch of other stuff that I don't want to go into, but there was a lot of other things that happened, but it was very like, I just wasn't okay. I was very hurt by the lack of, I would say, movement certain members of my community had. And I want to be clear, that is not the story of every single advocate who was there or every single advocate. The majority of advocates completely always supported me with coming forward with this story. Hands down. There were just enough who didn't want it, and they unfortunately had a certain amount of power. And that really, really sucked. And I know that there's going to be certain people who are pissed off at me saying that, and they're like, you should just be talking about the industry. You should be, and I'm like, no. We're part of the toxicity. We're part of it. We don't get an exception on this. Do I think the majority of the responsibility falls on the industry? Of course I do. But people were complicit with this. And if we are claiming as donor-conceived advocates that we are standing up for donor-conceived people, recipient parents, donors, then we have to take responsibility for when we fuck up. And this was a huge fuck up. This was very clearly wrong. So anyway, we kind of are there for a couple of days, and then we get to the ASRM conference. And there was a social media conference. I will be fully clear. I was not in the right headspace. I was angry at this point. And we get to the social media conference, and the best way I can describe it was it felt like a Mary Kay conference. It felt like an MLM, like a multi-level marketing thing. It really was just, it felt so icky. They were just talking about oh my gosh, here's how we recruit donors online. Everybody learn how to do a TikTok. I was watching my community become transactions by the minute. And of course, the panelists were almost all recipient parents or industry members. They did not have a single donor-conceived person speak, even though, for the record, I had more TikTok followers than any of them, at least at that time. I don't know right now. But I was, and they were all just talking about, getting that bag, how to make that money, how to do, and it just was so icky. And this was when I would say the sperm ads, egg recruitment ads were becoming really viral and big on TikTok and Instagram. These were when they were becoming really rough. And they were like, okay, let's break it into like little smaller breakout tables. And like, you know, we'll have the Instagram table go over there. And I went to the TikTok table. At this point, I think I had a few 100,000 followers. And they were like, let's go around the table and introduce ourselves. And I'm like, fuck this bullshit. And I just look at everybody and I'm like, hi, I'm a donor conceived person. I'm social media. And I was like, I just want to let you all know right now, I'm going to leave. I was like, you guys come on TikTok all the time and you literally dance around with designer bags telling people to sell their eggs and buy Prada. And I'm like, you are doctors. You took an oath. And I was like, how dare you be creating these ads in such a frivolous manner over something that is so freaking precious? And I was like, I beg of you to start genuinely thinking about donors, recipient parents, and donor-conceived people. And I was like, because this is so absolutely deplorable, this behavior I'm seeing on social media. And I got up and left. Again, I was not in a good headspace. And then I went to like every single, understandably though, I think understandably, I was having a very, in my opinion, rightful crash out. And then I went to like all the people who were like managing this meeting and I was like, why weren't donor conceived people speaking? Why didn't you have that? And they're like, well, we just didn't have space. And I'm like, you had space. You just didn't want it. And I was definitely like, I was ruthless. And the same person who I said like wasn't really my friend anymore apparently was going around to everybody going like, I'm so sorry for her. We will control her. Like we'll get a handle on her. Don't worry. I just want to say to that person, fuck you. Ugh, God, have the day you deserve. This person has kind of fallen from our community anyway. So doesn't really have too much, I would say, say in our community at this point, which is very much of a good riddance. There's been a lot of blowback with this person years since. So, which honestly, go fuck yourself. Like, so, good riddance. So anyway, we move forward. And I start talking to people who were there. And Eve Wiley, I think, was one of the bigger conversations I had, was one of the first real conversations about this I had. And I was like, yeah, did you hear about like the FBI thing? And Eve Wiley, of course, said, yeah, of course I heard. That was absolutely insane. And I was like, yeah, it's so sad, though, that none of you can come forward because you all signed that NDA. And Eve was like, what NDA? I didn't sign an NDA. And I was like, what do you mean you didn't sign an NDA? And Eve, as Eve said in her thing, she said, hey, do you want to sign this? And she was like, no, I don't want to. Now, I have confirmed with a few people that there was some kind of an NDA. No one remembers what was it. It doesn't sound to be that strong or powerful. I obviously don't have it. I don't know, but I know of at least 5 people who all came forward with the article who did not sign an NDA. So there's that at least. So for me, it was about finding, okay, who signed the NDA, who didn't sign the freaking NDA, who's willing to come forward. And that was a slow process, like kind of talking to people of like, okay, were you there? Are you comfortable coming forward? Okay, so that was a slow process, at least finding that. And then I didn't find the donors. I didn't find the donors till about, my God, it at least was, my God, if it was 2022, it didn't, I mean, we may have, I don't think we found the donors till like beginning of 2024. Like that's how long it took to find the donors. It took a long freaking time. And to get those contracts, like it was hard. And I was calling every freaking donor I know and was like, do you know anyone who donated at Seattle Sperm Bank? I was talking to all the Seattle recipient parents I knew. I was like, do you know your donor? Would they be willing to like, can I see their contract? And it took forever. Like I thought like this wasn't going to happen. I thought I was like, I'm never going to get this information. But eventually we did. So now I'm going to throw up the contract right now on YouTube so everybody can see it. This contract was signed in 2021. And as you can see in this contract, there's nothing in here whatsoever that states that the donor consents to the donations being sent to any government agency, let alone the FBI. I mean, the closest that we get in the contract are stations like, I understand that once I agree to participate in the donor program and have been accepted into the program, I may not impose restriction on the manner in which my donor sperm may be used. Little vague there, but that's it. That's how they're covered. But this is a massive lack of informed consent. We did interview a donor who did donate to Seattle Sperm Bank who told LGBTQ Nation they never were told this was a possibility. So this was never something that orally was told to them by the nurse, the physician, the cryobank, no one, and there is no informed consent within the contract. Now, LGBTQ Nation, of course, reached out to the FBI. I do want to read this from the article directly. LGBTQ Nation reached out to the National FBI office and received the following response from the Seattle Field Office Public Affairs Specialist Stephen Bernd, B-E-R-N-D, said our policies prohibit us, except in rare circumstances, for disclosing investigative techniques of an FBI investigation. However, I can plainly state that I did not find any information to suggest that the FBI has been purchasing sperm from a sperm bank. It's not... Next paragraph. It's not clear, however, whether the sperm would have been sold to the local or national office. Additionally, Bernard took less than an hour to reply to our request for a statement, raising the question of how much digging he did before saying he did not find any information. Now, one thing that the article actually did not touch on is that we have precedents for this. This isn't like out of the box, crazy pants, tinfoil hat thinking. We actually have very good precedents for it. In pediatrics, for decades, if you've been born in a hospital, hospitals test you for, as soon as you're born, for a number of preventable diseases. This has been, for decades, something extraordinarily life-saving. This has saved countless infants over the many, 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 many decades that this has been a program institution within the medical community. Unfortunately, it's been used by the police force recently. I'm going to get out my laptop for this one. There's actually even been a lawsuit in New Jersey over this. I'm just going to go to the top of the article. I actually also just noticed this. This article was published in 2022, the same year this was heard from the industry, from Seattle Sperm Bank. The article is called New Jersey Suit Shines Light on Police Use of Infant Blood in Probes. Last year, DNA from an infant's blood sample was used to track down a sex crime suspect in New Jersey. Public defenders in the state are now trying to discover through an open records lawsuit how often law enforcement agencies have used blood samples taken from infants through a mandatory health screening program to support criminal investigations. Health departments in all 50 states and the District of Columbia collect blood samples from newborns and test them for metabolic and genetic disorders. In New Jersey, all newborns are tested unless parents opt out on religious grounds. In at least one instance, the New Jersey State Police subpoenaed the laboratory in charge of the screening program and used a baby's blood sample to create a genealogical map that allowed detectives to locate a man accused of a 1996 rape, according to a suit filed in a New Jersey Superior Court last week. While there are documented cases of police trying to obtain infant blood samples from state health departments' labs, the one in New Jersey is among the first known criminal cases where the practice has led to the prosecution of a suspect. So basically, when the baby's blood is taken, it's kind of the information is stored on something that's called I believe a blood card, and that's kept for a period of time. And the police have been accessing these cards. Doesn't this kind of sound a little familiar? Doesn't this sound a little scary? Doesn't this sound a little like a blueprint? So they're already doing this. This is already a thing. And I did speak to a pediatrician about this, and she's extremely upset because she's like, this is a life-saving program. This has saved the lives of countless infants, and the fact that this is being bastardized in this way is ridiculous. And one of the things that she told me specifically was that the fact that this sperm, and here's the thing, maybe the sperm is being used for training purposes. Maybe the FBI really is just practicing splatter patterns. Maybe it is. But the fact that, and this is what she specifically said, she was like, the fact that it's getting used for non-reproductive purposes is wrong. They signed up for this being used for reproductive purposes. That's not what it's getting used for. And we know they didn't consent to this. This article will get added to the caption of the episode if you want to read it for yourself. So let's go over everything. We now can prove that the donors are not consenting to this. We can show precedent. One more fun piece of it. I got a freaking transcript. Remember when I said that this meeting took place in person and it took place over Zoom? And you know when you have that little chat room in the Zoom? I was able to get the transcript. And we're going to read it right now. I have to cover names. Sorry. I know everybody wants the full tea, but that would involve Laura getting sued and possibly getting jail time. So we are hiding the names. Obviously, the transcript is going to be posted on the YouTube video. So if you want to read it for yourself, go right ahead. But I'm just going to read it right now off of my phone for everybody. So obviously, I'm just going to be going line by line. When I breathe to pause, that means I've switched to somebody else. So let's start from the top. And this is obviously this was a good few pages into the transcript. This was definitely they've already been having this meeting now for a little bit. What was said about the FBI and DNA testing sperm donors? That particular bank, I believe Seattle, submits sperm for research, including to the FBI. They can opt out, but it might be part of why there are fewer diverse donors. Pretty shocking practice. The prison industrial complex is all around us at all times. That is so mind-blowing. Eek. Wow, that is incredibly concerning. Ironically, that is a big problem with genetic testing websites as well. They do the same thing, and frankly, I don't think the opt-outs are good enough. It's been a little difficult to follow this discussion. Thanks for filling in the gaps in the chat. That is wild to learn about the bank and remember about genetic testing companies. That's a little different. That is only GEDmatch, and it is opt-in for their matching database. They are not manipulating your actual DNA sample. This was about experimenting with someone's semen, it seems. This is what I'm referring to, and then provides a link. DNA forensics is very concerning, and wherever people submit DNA, there is a possibility of it being used in ways people aren't aware of or didn't consent to. Yeah, There's no way if the FBI has your semen that you haven't been added to a criminal database of some kind. Thank you so much for bringing that into the conversation. So critical. So as we can clearly hear from that, they know this is bad. They are very well aware this is good. They even said the prison industrial complex is around us at all times. So they knew this was bad. They knew how bad it was, yet they have stayed all silent. Here's the thing. Yes, Seattle is 100%, like they're the ones who said this, but every single person who was there, whether they were there in person or over Zoom, you are complicit. You are complicit in this. And I do not want to hear freaking again when donor-conceived people are saying, hey, can we have fertility fraud legislation to ensure that doctors can't rape their patients? Or can we make sure that I have a reasonable sibling limit and decrease my chances of incest? Or can I get access to my medical records? I do not want to hear from anyone in the freaking industry ever again that no, we can't do that because that's going to hurt profit. That's going to hurt accessibility. You don't give a shit about accessibility. You don't give a shit about your patients. They're not even your patients. They're your numbers. They're your customers. I'm sorry, but every single time we ask for rights and then the industry virtue signals at us, they're like, well, this could really harm, we have literally been told fertility fraud legislation, when the doctor switches out the chosen donor sperm for their own, the fact that we want to criminalize that act, and we have been told that that could actively hurt accessibility for LGBTQIA couples. Are you kidding me? One, how? But also, you don't care about LGBTQIA couples because this is a threat to LGBTQIA couples. This is a threat to any donor, recipient, parent of color. This is a threat to the trans community who uses these cryobanks to store their sperm and their egg before they medically transition. And now looky-loo, you now have created the ability, allegedly, to have genetic trackers on all of these people. You don't give a shit about these people. You don't give a shit about these marginalized communities. Or you would have said something. You would have said something, but you didn't. None of you did. Not a single one of you did. You kept quiet. I never want to hear a donor-conceived person ever gaslit by this freaking industry that what we are asking for is somehow just not achievable. It is. Other countries do it every single day. What we're asking for right now is to just catch up with other countries that are significantly better with human rights. So, I mean, again, surprise, surprise, the United States behind on that homework. But I especially never want to hear the industry claim to care about families of color, the LGBTQIA community, couples struggling with infertility. I never want to hear them ever use that kind of virtue signaling as an excuse to not put in proper regulations that we desperately need. That to me is it's straight up narcissistic. It's fucking abusive. This is a story that I am going to ask every single person on here. I need you to talk about this story. I need you to share it with your friends. People have to understand how bad this is. This story so perfectly encapsulates the absolute just toxicity within the industry and the danger that right now their practices pose to everyone who uses it, especially under this administration. I mean, I would say this under any government administration, but especially this one. When we have Doge accessing sensitive information, when we have Trump and his cabinet playing the freaking Handmaid's Tale script on us, we have to know these things. And I understand that questioning the fertility industry is uncomfortable, but this is straight up dangerous. This isn't just wrong. This is a betrayal. This is a betrayal of trust. This is a betrayal of vulnerability. This is every single person who was in there who never came forward deserves to be held accountable for their silence. And the fact that Seattle thought that this was totally normal, totally fine to completely say in front of everybody is terrifying, because they either allegedly didn't know what the big deal was, or it's because allegedly they know that they weren't alone. And that's, of course, one of my biggest fears. Please share this story. This must be understood. I need people to understand what this industry is doing, because if we all understand, we all stand together, we get organized, it will force the industry to shift and change. Other countries have made these necessary changes. We must follow suit. This is dangerous for everyone involved, donors, recipient parents, and donor-conceived people. It's dangerous for everybody. Please, please get this news out there. And for any of those donor-conceived people out there who were upset that I went forward with this, be upset, be bent, be mad. I don't care. I really don't. The reason that you are upset that I came forward with this story is because you know you fucked up. You know you were wrong. That's why you're upset that I came forward with this. Because you decided years ago to take the easy way out, that it was too complicated to come forward, that this was too scary. And now that I came forward, instead of owning up, taking accountability that you fucked up, you now have decided to come after me and attack me. Which, go ahead. Hit me with your best shot. How do you think this is going to look in years to come? So be upset, be angry. We all know how not taking accountability goes. We know how that story always ends. And here's the thing, to those donor-conceived people, if you actually just fucking apologized, if you did, people would forgive you. Like, they genuinely would. People would forgive you. They would understand. Instead of trying to cover your ass, try and say it wasn't that big of a deal. All of you have made it 10 times worse. Every single one of you. But I can't hold your hand. But you made your choices, and I am going to continue to make mine. And now we move forward. We move forward much more educated. We move forward understanding the circumstances a little bit better. Education is always power. Knowledge is power. And we are now more well-informed, especially in this administration. And on that, I am going to sign off. Y'all are amazing. Y'all are fantastic and wonderful, wonderful people. I cannot thank all the people who did help me get this story published, whether they were able to put their name on it or they had to be anonymous. Thank you. Many people's help went into this story. And even if you didn't directly help, even if you just supported me through the years, thank you. So many donor-conceived people actively, and donors, recipient parents, were trying to help get this story published. Help me find evidence. It really was, as much as there were people trying to stop me, there were so many more people who absolutely understood how bad this was. And I want to say thank you, because our community, genuinely, is fucking fantastic. But that is it for the episode. All links are in the caption. Y'all are fantastic. My name is Laura High. Thank you for listening.